Alright, I'm gonna finish this hopefully today. Yesterday I was continuing on about whatever I was talking about, I can't remember. OCD. And I'm talking about signs and symptoms and how people live and the things that they have to sort of live with, what it means to them. You know, and I got as far as talking about some of the causes. Now, I went through a couple of them, and there are some more that they found, and really what they mean for the people who actually have to live with it. Because I did kind of want to talk a bit about what each one means, because the research they've done on this condition is quite good, I think. And I'm kind of hoping my payments kick in before too long, because I really need to lay down. Right, so I am going to kick off with some more of the causes that they found on OCD, the reasons for it. We can start off with things like behavioural causes. There is a theory, they've got a theory, that someone with OCD will avoid whatever they fear. They will do something else repeatedly to reduce the stress surrounding that. They will. They'll do whatever. They part of what they do is part of their OCD, or part of whatever it is they're doing, is because they're avoiding fear. There's something they're afraid of for whatever it is. So the initial fear could happen around at a time of intense stress, like significant loss or traumatic event. Okay. Once they have associated a fear of something, they will avoid it at all cost and find something to replace it with, so they never have to face it. They have found that it's most common to do this with those who have a genetic kind of factor. Okay. I mean, we all do it, and we can all sit here and say that, we all want to avoid fear. We've all got something in our lives that we're trying to avoid. That nobody wants to face our fears. I mean, growing up, what is the one thing our parents always told us to do is to face our fears. Don't be afraid. Face our fears. We all do that. We've all been there. We've all had that thrown at us somewhere along the line. People with OCD never do that. They will avoid their fears. They don't like facing their fears. They will try to avoid fear. Whatever they've built that fear around, they will avoid it like the plague. That constant sentence, that one sentence, face your fears, do not be afraid. Something we're plugged, especially at children. Parents, teachers, whatever, they plug it. they throw it at us constantly. Do not be afraid, face your fears, you should never be afraid. It's something that's thrown at children left, right, and centre. So, but if someone with OCD, that sentence, that phrase will have no impact in their lives. They will avoid whatever they're afraid of, whatever they've built a fear around, they will avoid it like the plague so they never have to face it. And they have found in their research that that kind of thinking, way of thinking, is the most common if there is a genetic factor in play. They've also found that there is a cognitive kind of factor as well. People with OCD, they found can misinterpret their own thoughts. I mean, it's pretty common, isn't it? I mean, I have a tendency to argue with myself. I do it out loud. I will argue with myself a lot. I don't generally always agree with myself. That voice in my head, you know, the discussions that everybody has with themselves, I won't always agree with myself, and I have a lot of arguments with myself and a lot of discussions with myself. Again, it's part of the reason why I started this channel, so that I could voice those thoughts and voice those conversations that I have with myself, so I can make sense of what goes on in my head without driving myself crazy in the long run, and lower my paranoia as well, because actually since I started doing this, my paranoia has kind of lowered as well, which is kind of cool. Still get the odd bit, but my paranoia levels have dropped as well, which is really useful. But yeah, but we can all kind of sit there and go, oh yeah, maybe I've thought that wrong, could this mean that, maybe it's not. But they do have a tendency that they could misinterpret their own thoughts. And this comes with those intrusive thoughts, you know, the ones we don't want, the ones that tell us things that we don't like, you know, ones when we get really angry or really sad, or if we're hurting. The really intrusive thoughts that tell us things we don't like or don't want or don't need. You know, and they're usually really fleeting. Whereas with someone with OCD, those are extreme and they're not usually fleeting, and they will misinterpret them. You know, and there will be, you know, I mean, we all know, I mean, I found another example of this one. I like examples. For all the parents or even older siblings, we all had it, or even people with large families. We're all together, whatever, and the kids are under your feet. And parents are screaming at them. And you hear it every often in a while. I wish you'd just go away, just give me 5 minutes, just want a bit of peace. Inside that parent's head, all you know it, especially as an adult, you know that what's going on in that parent's head is just fuck off, just go away, just go away. Leave me alone, give me 5 minutes peace, I just want you to just leave me alone. I don't want you, just go away. I just can't deal with you right now. I don't want you here. I wish you'd just go away. I just wish I didn't have you right now. Go away, leave me alone, get lost, disappear before I do something to you that I wish that I would regret doing. You know, the kind of thoughts where you just want to, you know, for pretty much everybody, those kind of thoughts, they're frustrating thoughts because you are tired, you're frustrated, the kids are screaming, you've got a headache and they're under your feet, and all you want to do is have 5 minutes peace and to be left alone, get rid of your headache. You know, breathe for 5 minutes without listening to them scream. You don't really want to hurt them. You don't really want to get rid of them. You don't really want anything to happen to them. Because if they really left, and if you really hurt them, and if anything ever happened to them, it would be the end of you. And you love hearing them, you love listening to them, and actually, at the end of the day, you enjoy listening to them play, you love watching them running around, and it's absolutely lovely. But there are just those moments where you just want to... But with someone with OCD, those fleeting moments that most people have are not fleeting, they are intense. They are not at all moments, that would be an intense kind of rah in their head. And they would have thoughts of harming that kid, and it would be by accident. I would just let that kid have an accident. Just let them have an accident. Kids under my feet, they're driving me insane. Oh, I've got a headache, I'm super stressed. Let them have an accident. Let them fall down the stairs. If they fell down the stairs, they'll be quiet for 5 minutes. If they bump their head on that, then they'll just be quiet for 2 minutes. Oh, it'll be alright. It'll be fine if they just sort of did this. If something like that happened to them, it won't be your fault. It'll be fine. Those kind of thoughts. It's not like they generally want to hurt them, but they wouldn't mind if something actually happened to them. And it hurts them. That thought would be persistent, it will be loud, and it will take on great significance in their heads. And on top of everything else, they believe that these thoughts are really going to happen. And so what it will do is it will make them take extreme action to prevent any kind of threat or danger from happening. Because they don't want anything to happen to that kid. They don't want anything happening at all. So they will then start taking extreme measures to make sure nothing happens. And that will start a cycle. They will then become so safety conscious that they won't be able to stop. And that type of OCD becomes part of their entire existence. They will start putting safety on everything. They will become super safety conscious. They will be so afraid of that child getting hurt anywhere and everywhere that child goes. Then there will be nothing anyone could do to stop them from thinking that if they did anything else, that if they stopped being safety conscious, that child would get hurt. So they have to keep going. Keep them safe, I must keep them safe at all times. Because they can't let their guard down. Because if they let their guard down, their child would get hurt. Okay, and then of course we have an environmental. They found an environment. Now this one kind of was interesting. They found an environmental cause. This one they found come from really stressful events. But again, they found that this one linked to the genetic causes. And they didn't really think of this as anything more than a trigger, that environmental causes were a trigger for OCD more than a cause. It was a trigger. Whereas the rest were causes for the behaviour. This was more like, if something happened in the environment in which they were, within 6 months of that event happening, the behaviours would change, the behaviours would happen. Their OCD would happen. Yeah? So it's not something that happened constantly, whereas all the others are thoughts in their heads, their causes of their behaviours. This is going to take up to 6 months for anything to change their behaviours. And they're saying things like childbirth. So if there are complications during pregnancy or childbirth, it can take a few months for their OCD to kick in. Things like severe conflict, illnesses, or even a traumatic brain injury alongside PTSD. Things like that could trigger OCD, but it's not the cause of it, it's a trigger for it, according to this. There is a diagnosis for it. They do look for specific criteria when they diagnose OCD. Again, like most of mental health conditions, they've got to make sure that it's not a result of substance abuse or other medical conditions. Or it can't be explained by other health issues or medications. Now I found that really interesting, that they have to make sure that no other that they aren't on any medications that could cause them to behave in this way. So I'm assuming that there are medications that could cause this, which doesn't surprise me, considering a lot of things like, if they're on like medications like that are on like antidepressants or anti-anxieties or mood suppressors, things like that, they probably could cause behavioural changes. It wouldn't surprise me, and in the slightest it wouldn't surprise me. But the actual criteria to be diagnosed OCD is things like the presence of obsessions, compulsions, or both. So it has to be one or the other, or both. Obsessions, compulsions are time consuming. They're causing significant distress or impairment in social occupations or other settings, like work or home. That is the criteria. That is your criteria. That you are, there is a presence of obsessions or compulsions or both in your life, that the obsessions and compulsions are time consuming, causing or causing significant distress and or impairment in either social occupations, work, or everything else. Yeah. That is the criteria of being diagnosed with OCD. And the treatments are actually, the treatments are fairly simple. I say simple, they are long term. You're talking CBT, obviously, and exposure and response therapy, which is diagnosed to help them control their urges and resist their compulsions. I've never heard of that one. That was really interesting. That one's specifically designed for people with OCD. Okay, medications are used. That is one thing about this one. Medications are used, but not all people with OCD respond to the standard SSIs. But they did find something really interesting, that the tuberculosis drug, I don't know if I'm saying this right, D-cycloserine, this is spelled D/CYCLOOSIRINE. D-cycloserine, alongside the CBT, so both together, seems to help them. Go figure that one. Tuberculosis drug alongside CBT seems to help. I wouldn't have seen that one coming in a million years. Okay. One thing I will say is, with treatment, they can have a decent life. They can learn to control their urges, and they can live an okay kind of life. But it has been found that their urges, their obsessions, their compulsions, they can come back with a vengeance much later on in life. So even if they got it under control as young adults, later on in life it can come back. It can come back, it can become really strong again. The urges, those really strong obsessions, really strong compulsions can come back again later on in life. I will say this, if that happens, when that happens, seeking or re-seeking medical help is a good idea. Re-talking to your mental health specialist, getting back into therapy to regain that control is always helpful. You know, but other than that, once you have, that is pretty much all that needs to be done with it. It's about getting the control you need with the right help, with the right specialists. And following the advice that you get given at all times. So I'm going to go, and I shall speak to you later. Okay.